Welcome to episode 55 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I just saw Jaws for the very first time, and now I get to talk about it.
You know, I try not to be the, oh, you didn't see this movie type person, but I'm going to have to be that person now because Jaws is a staple, and, whatever. I'm Don, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and extremely disappointed in James. This is like the Mount Rushmore of horror movies, and he didn't.
I've seen pieces.
No,
okay? It's just I'd never seen the whole thing at once in order where it made sense. That's all.
So you missed out on all the pop culture references to it. You know, like all the awesome things that go along with it, the way it's been copied over and over again. Just even the jokes from Katy Perry's Super Bowl performance.
Is this a bad time to mention that I've seen all the Sharknadoes?
This is an extremely bad time because I just forgotten about that because I'm so pissed at you.
So you know who else loves Jaws? Jonathan Jans, our guest today. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm always in a good mood, but I'm in an especially good mood because I love Jaws with such passion. I think Don, a moment ago, you said that you'd put Jaws on the Mount Rushmore of horror cinema. Totally agree. I would put Jaws on the Mount Rushmore of American cinema. I think that it's right up there with Star Wars, Wizard of Oz. In fact, when I think, of course, cinephiles would say The Godfather and other things like that. But I don't know many movies more famous or beloved or that have more passionate devotees than Jaws. And it's completely deserving of that ardor. I could not be a bigger fan.
I would actually like to jump on what you just said, because having just seen it for legitimately my first time fully through, I think it holds up 100%. This is 1975, and it is great today. I saw it yesterday. It's brand new in my head. It's totally fresh, and I have no complaints about it that I would even have about stuff that comes out now. And it blew me away. The tension building is insane. And, I expected some pretty hokey shark shots. And there's some stuff that's not perfect. But holy crap, this holds up so well. So I totally see why you would hold it on that level. Because I do feel the exact same way about The Wizard of Oz.
Ah, nice.
Okay. You got some respect back from me.
That undid some of the Sharknado damage.
I promise to erase that before this episode is over.
I will say this, James, before we really get started. If you love what's been done in this film, stop after the second movie. Don't bother with I almost said Sharknado. Don't worry with Jaws 3D and Jaws the Revenge, the fourth one. Because then it gets into this whole thing of it's as if the shark is following us and it's in the DNA of the sharks to come after us as a family. It gets really weird after the second movie. Second movie is a drop off of the first one, but you don't need to see any of the sequels. You get everything you need to get out of the first one.
Well, I mean, I just don't see how a sequel couldn't be a drop off because it legitimately was so good. This is normally the time when I ask somebody, why did you pick this film? And obviously, if it's on your Mount Rushmore of all movies, that's one reason. But tell me instead, how has this influenced your life? Or what point did you first see it? Or just how did it reach that level with you, basically?
Yeah, I think the funny thing is I didn't actually see Jaws when I was younger, when I was in my I don't think I saw it really until I was like 15 or 16, yet it affected me because I'd seen tiny little clips here and there. I saw this just horrifically bad, not horrifically scary, but just this just laughable, risible movie called The Great White. And it has different titles. It's under a different title on Netflix. I think it was made in Italy. Or sorry, not Netflix, but Amazon Prime. You know, Amazon Prime has a collection of some of the worst horror movies ever made for free.
Oh, yes.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, they should actually, you know, add credits to your bill for watching them. But that movie, I saw it when I was like 9. It had a brief theatrical run in the U.S., 9 or 10, and it just terrified me. It's so ridiculous now. It's so. I watched it with one of my daughters recently, and I can't believe how bad it was. But like, it was the combination of seeing clips of Jaws and then that horrible movie that still today. So I grew up partially on this lake in this lake community, and even though it's inland Indiana, I mean, obviously no sharks here. I was forever just terrified of a shark swimming up beneath me and biting me in half. I was terrified. This shows you how debilitating and how profound the effect was. Swimming in swimming pools. Not even joking. I believe that they would swim up through the filters or the holes in the bottom, through the grates, and get me, and somehow, you know, expand once it reached the water. Jaws created in me this lasting elemental fear, and I still have that. I still hate my family and I went to Virginia last summer, and we were in, I think it was Yorktown Beach, and I was so afraid of like a bull shark getting one of my kids. So that's the first thing about Jaws. But then my relationship with it is, you know, as an adult, even though I'm still afraid of a shark attack. I've been teaching. I'm an English film lit and creative writing teacher, and I've been teaching film lit. This will be my 19th year coming up. Jaws has been. I show 4 feature films throughout the year, throughout the semester. I've been showing Jaws for. It's the only one that's lasted from the beginning of my tenure to now. For 19 years, every semester, 2 or 3 times a semester, I show Jaws. I teach Jaws. And the amazing thing is that instead of getting tired of it, instead of seeing the flaws, seeing the errors, I'm more impressed every time I see it. I see something new every single time, and so do my students. They always see stuff because they're sharp, and they'll point something out that I'd never thought of before. So I just think Jaws, I think it's a miracle. I think it really is that singular film with endless rewatch value that is a masterclass in every single aspect of the art of filmmaking.
That might be the best answer we've ever gotten on this show.
Well,
I'm not joking.
It's the most long-winded. I'm going to take that one.
I don't know about that. I was an English major and got my master's in creative writing. And I had a professor who showed us The Lion King at the beginning of a lit crit class. Yeah. And then every time that he went over different types of criticism, he would relate it back to The Lion King. And I thought that was so cool because it was something everyone has seen, right?
Sure.
And I was just thinking how great it is with Jaws that everybody's seen it. And literally, I totally had this cognitive dissonance that I hadn't seen it until now. And I find that really funny. But no, what I wanted to say with that is I think it's so cool how we use films now to talk about literature and other stuff as well, because it is so easy to show and share. We don't have to read the full novel. We don't have to interpret it differently. Like, we can literally pull out these scenes and show it. Is that kind of what you do with Jaws, or how do you teach it?
Absolutely. Well, we do watch it from beginning to end, but it takes us about 6 periods, and each period is 50 minutes long, like just shy of an hour. So we write about it, we discuss it, I stop it, and so we might get through. It's not unlike the filming of Jaws itself, which took forever. Like some days, I think Spielberg said they only got through 1/16 of a page on certain days because things were so difficult on that shoot. And, in my class, there are days we'll only get through 15 minutes of the movie because there's so much there. There's so much material to mine and examine. So we really put it under the microscope and examine it. And like you just said, I think it's so true and so uniquely wonderful about film. I love books, above all, as far as the art forms that we could study. But I think film is this uniquely suited art form for study, to treat as a text, to treat as literature, because like you said, it is so compact. It is, just this lightning bolt of information coming at you so quickly. And then it appeals to both the sight and sound. It works on so many levels. There's the science of it, the art of it. There's the literature of it. You can look at a film the way you look at a novel, a short story, a poem. It has every element. So it's this uniquely diverse art form that I think just makes it, because I use it in English, I use it in creative writing, I use it in advanced creative writing. I mean, we use it to become better storytellers on the page because of exactly the point you made a moment ago.
That's really cool. Don, I know you teach a lot of films in your classes for kind of a similar purpose. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything that you want to add as to the benefits of that or why you do it?
Well, for me, it's typically talking about films as historical artifacts. So for this one, you could really get into, the politics of that time period. You could get into recreation. But as far as the artistic side, that's not my training. That's not my area. So it wouldn't be something for me to speak on. But it would be really good to, with a good number of horror films, for that matter, to talk about why these films are being made, what symbolism might be there, what's being represented, what's being discussed, what are they analyzing. Because there is a very good critique of American political institutions, whether we're talking about small towns or larger areas or whatever, because you see how, jumping ahead, you see how in the film there is the mayor and the city council, or at least the island council, they come together and say, hey, summer equals summer dollars, and we can't shut this place down. Or even the fact that this someone being eaten is an inconvenience to everybody else when when Chief Brody says, hey, we need to shut the beach down. People start getting more irate, and the mayor jumps in and is like, only 24 hours. Only 24 hours. And Brody, under his breath, he's like, we never discussed it. He's kind of meek at that point. But the entire crowd is like losing their shit over this. The mayor's trying to reassure him and saying, oh, it's only going to be 24 hours. And then somebody in the crowd yells out, 24 hours is like 3 weeks. That tells you how, even this community is so focused on keeping these beaches open so they can have the money, they can have the entertainment, so they can't be inconvenienced at all. I mean, we think about 24 hours. 24 hours is not that much time. But to these folks, it's like you're shutting down the summer. Just for, shutting down the beaches for one day is going to impact them so much. Now, given current circumstances, I look at that as a great parallel to the pandemic and the quarantines associated with COVID-19. How so many people feel inconvenienced because they can't do something small.
Yep, totally agree. I think it's more relevant now than it was in 1975. I completely agree with all that. Yeah. I mean, and we see this every day. We see people placing commerce above human safety and human life, right? Yeah. I mean, that is one of mankind's, greatest flaws and sins, but we see it every day. I mean, that's why the mayor, his actions, the town's actions, as you said, the town council, it is so plausible. It is so believable because it's exactly how we see people act all the time. They're doing it right now, right? Mm-hmm. We see video footage of people fighting because a store wants them to wear masks. They're flipping out because they have to wear a mask for 5 minutes to go pick up some milk, right? As though that's more important, that quote unquote liberty is more important than all these people who are immunocompromised and could die from the spread of COVID-19. Oh, that doesn't matter as much as my freedom to get milk without a mask.
Right.
What a weird freedom, by the way.
Oh,
Like, I don't remember that one ever being listed anywhere when people talk to me about freedoms, like, even all the way back in 2019. But no, like watching this fresh, like I was so like, look at that. They're on the beach when they know that something can kill them. This is spring break. This is Memorial Day weekend. This is all this shit that we're seeing in the news. Like it's literally right there. We won't close the beach. We want money. We're free to come down here and be killed by it. And then when somebody gets killed by it, the mom immediately flips on everybody and she's like, well, you knew it was dangerous. We all knew it was dangerous. Like, what are you talking about, lady?
Yeah, I do think people have the human nature. We have this endless ability to delude ourselves. And I think that's like Chief Brody in that scene. His son, his wife says they can play on the beach if they want in that scene with Alex Kittner. And Brody says, no, it's okay. Let him go in. He knows. He's seen the remains of Chrissy Watkins. He knows deep down that it's not a boating propeller that has chopped her into chum. He knows that there's a shark out there, and he lets his own flesh and blood, his own little boy, go in the water anyway. And again, we're seeing that right now. I mean, people know intellectually, most people know that there's a pandemic occurring, right? But how many people are just telling themselves, what's not going to happen to me? It's not going to happen to my family. It's far away. It's happening in New York, not in Indiana, or it's happening in Florida, right? That's part of the genius of Jaws. It is so. One thing I love about fiction, they call fiction the truth inside the lie. Yeah, so Jaws is a fictional story, but it absolutely vibrates. It thrums with truths, often uncomfortable truths that we might not, like to talk about, but they certainly are true.
I'm in Arizona, and Phoenix is just skyrocketing.
Dude, you're in the news for the wrong reason.
Yeah, definitely. We are literally on track to pass what New York dealt with. And I will tell you straight out, I went to CVS to pick up some prescriptions. I was the only person wearing a mask. Well, me and the person I went with were the only people wearing masks. Nobody working there, nobody like even the pharmacy people. I'm like, hello, like maybe I'm expecting too much here, but come on.
The pharmacy people weren't wearing masks.
I'm blown away by that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like it. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was just the one pharmacy person I dealt with. Like maybe there were others that I didn't see. I don't know. But everyone that I encountered wasn't wearing a mask. And I'm literally like, this is why I don't leave my house unless I have to, because Phoenix is a time bomb, man.
It really is
crazy.
It is. And, you're talking, I'm not trying to paint the whole state with one brush, but Arizona has quite a few retirees, right?
Yes, definitely.
So talk about a susceptible population. I mean, you would think, because it's staring them in the face at all moments, the knowledge that the target audience for COVID-19 is everywhere in Arizona. You'd think that place of all places, and of course we're seeing it in Florida too, right? Florida is the other one that's blowing up. You would think that those places would be uniquely sensitive to the susceptibility of its populace, but it's the opposite, apparently.
Yeah, it's really weird. And going back to what you said about his son going into the water, I saw a video of a red hat wearing person who was like, yeah, our neighbor died from COVID and his son was on a ventilator. And, I know it's real, but who knows what to believe. And I'm like, literally, I'm more bald now because of Twitter than I was before, because I just ripped my hair out watching this stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You just said everyone around you was affected. And then you're like, but I think I'm okay because it hasn't affected me.
Oh,
it's such a weird mentality. And I think Jaws totally gets that. And I don't know what was going on in 75 in that regard. Maybe Don knows more history on this part. But it's like they time traveled, wrote down what's happening now, and then went back and made this movie because it just resonated with me. It was crazy.
Honestly, make the I guess the parallel as well with the idea that baby boomers themselves got so used to getting everything that who the hell's going to tell them no? And you shouldn't be telling them no now. But yeah, I mean, there's that individualism that comes with being American as well, to where we don't look at this collective identity to where there is a serious crisis or something that's taking place with respect to disease. Because, you know, if it's something like 9/11, everyone comes together for a period. And then, of course, we all go back to our different corners. And I think that's probably what it is. Nobody's seen the shark, you know, and the one time they do see it, or at least a couple of people that see it. But even then there's this question of, well, we can go find the shark and deal with it, because there's no moment where anybody's having a clear plan as how to really not only deal with the two people that have been killed. I mean, one person you're not sure, because Brody and the medical examiner agree that it's a shark, but then the medical examiner comes back and says, no, I think it was probably a boat propeller that did this to her. And Brody has to change that. You know, you see this gaslighting that the city fathers are giving him, or even the prodding that they're giving him by saying, like, hey, you know, Chief, you're hired, not elected, so we can fire you as well. It is kind of the indication. But it would be it's just so interesting how this takes place on the beach. You have all these people there. Couple people see it. Everybody understands it's a shark, but because it's so rare, it's only 1% of us are probably going to get eaten by the shark, or you know, only 1 to 2% of us are going to die from this disease if we get it. You know what? Even if the shark bites you, he might not kill you. He might just rip off an arm or something. You know, you get this moment where people are not really understanding what the danger is, because they don't want to have to deal with that reality of being inconvenienced.
Yeah, and it's such selfishness too. I mean, yeah, you know, we heard this. I think it was one of the I'm not sure if it was a Texas senator or governor, was talking early on about how, you know, 3% are going to die, and that's the price we've got to pay to jumpstart the economy, right? That's an acceptable toll. We can do that, right? And these 69 and 70-year-olds, they need to do their duty. They need to do their part, and you know, if they die, well, then they die. There's one thing also I wanted to bring up that you kind of addressed, which is that pivotal moment. You talked about the gaslighting, but the pivotal moment where the medical examiner we see him folding. We actually see him caving under the political pressure from the mayor and then the journalist, Carl Gottlieb, the screenwriter. And what I love about that part, there's so much about that part I love, but one thing, it shows how nuanced that screenplay is, how exacting the language is, because he says, yeah, it might have been a boating propeller, a boating accident. Yeah. And Brody said, that's not what you told me over the phone. And the medical examiner said, I was wrong. We'll have to change our reports. So he uses the word we. He says, we. And then Brody says, and you'll stand by that? And his answer is, I'll stand by you. And then the next thing he does, as the mayor continues to talk to Brody, he walks away, the medical examiner, from Brody after saying, I'll stand by you. And it's this beautiful foreshadowing just by shifting the pronouns of how Brody, because listen, when Alex Kintner gets killed, it's not the medical examiner who's going to get slapped in the face by Mrs. Kintner. It's not, you're right. It is Brody's head on the chopping block. His chief responsibility is safety. And it is he that this is going to be placed on when it goes bad. And I love how that moment is foreshadowed by that just horribly bureaucratic moment where we see the medical examiner cave and we see the mayor basically, you know, snowplow Brody into doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think that scene is so powerful. That's another thing that really resonated with me with news right now, because not to take this down a totally different path, but you know, all these supposed suicides taking place in trees outside of public buildings.
Oh my gosh.
And that was my first thought when I saw this medical examiner change his mind. And it just rips me up. I don't know. And yeah, that scene, just there's so much going on there, like you said, and so much nuance. And I hope to write something on this level one day.
Well, I like that you brought that up because it needs to be brought up, and we need to be talking about it more, right? It's like, yeah, obviously, suicide is a tragic thing, but this is clearly not. When you have this happen to one person, I guess one person could commit suicide, but when you have multiple, this is a sick, frightening pattern that needs to be discussed and needs to be foregrounded in the news cycle, right? This needs to be front and center because this is this national emergency. It should be treated as such, but yet it's not getting. Instead, we get the president's latest inane tweet becomes the headline in the news. And of course, I'm all for calling him out, but this, what you just mentioned, it is so horrifying. And yet we're told that the reality is different than what the reality obviously is.
We've got this moment where Hooper, the marine biologist, shows up and he's questioning what's going on because he's figuring, well, it's got to be this type of shark. He's going over all the schematics and the breakdown of what kind of shark it could be, and the mannerisms, the hunting patterns, all these things. And after the Alex's mom gives posts the reward $3,000, and I'll find this, to find the shark, bring it in. And Quint at the meeting, of course, it's a great scene when Quint's introduction, where everyone is in there like arguing with one another, and he takes his fingernails and runs them down the chalkboard to get everyone's attention. And that moment, I'm like, I've seen that done in so many movies because it was done in that movie. And it's just great because he's sitting there like, you want your shark? But, if you want me to go out there, I'll hunt it. I'll find that fish. I'll do this, blah, 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 blah. But it's going to cost you $10,000. And that's one of those things where you're like, okay, this guy knows his shit, because he's not sitting there blinking at the 3,000. He's like, I'm not going out there because I know what it is. I know it's going to be something big. But that first group of fishermen that goes out, or at least the first ones that come back claiming to have a shark, Hooper sees the shark, goes over the bite pattern and the bite radius and all this other stuff. And he's telling these guys like, I don't know. I don't think this is it. And he's getting an argument with the fishermen. They're saying like, what? Stick your head in there and see. I bet you it's big enough to fit you. And he's sitting there like arguing with these guys like, something's telling me that this is not it. But you see how Brody, the mayor, all these fishermen that are there to take their photo for the paper, for the AP or the UPI, to take their picture for this, and kind of even mock the beach closed sign because he has the deputy, or at least one of the other officers, holding it.
Yeah.
And all I thought at that moment was mission accomplished. When George W. Bush did the tailhook landing on the aircraft carrier, and he's sitting there, is like, mission accomplished. We succeeded. Did what we needed to do in the war. Now that was 2003. We're still in Iraq, not in a full-fledged war capacity, but we still have people there. When I went to the military, we were still there. We were having the surge and sending a lot more people there. So for me, looking at this film as a kid, I knew, I'm like, we're only an hour into this movie. Maybe there's another shark, or that's not the right shark. But then seeing it as an adult, I see it with that political stunt that's being played.
That's so true. And that's, again, that's what we're seeing right now. You had yesterday, it was yesterday or the day before, you have the current president discouraging testing because it's bad press. Because the numbers, when we test, we find positive cases. So therefore, the answer is to not test. And like it is so anti-science, so anti-human safety that you can't even. It's surreal. Like it is the supreme example of self-interest. He would rather have positive re-election news and momentum than people being tested and to do the necessary contact tracing to help this pandemic, to help get it under control. And it's exactly what you were alluding to with the mayor. He doesn't like the bad press, right? That's what he wants to stop. And because if he gets bad press, he's not going to get reelected. And that's all that matters to him. It doesn't matter that people are going to get killed by the shark or be endangered by the shark. It's the bad press he wants to avoid. Same thing today.
If you did the right thing, you would actually stand a chance of getting reelected.
Yeah.
That's what blows my mind. It explains a lot about the current president to me, though, because I guess if you never check your bills, you don't have to pay anybody. And things just started making way more sense to me. That's all I'm saying. But I do appreciate the great memes that we've gotten because of it. Like, if you don't take a pregnancy test, we'll stop having humans.
Exactly.
It's just fucking amazing. But yeah, you mix that into Jaws.
If you ever jump on the scale, you don't gain weight.
That's right.
That's my plan. I've been 36 pounds since I was like 4. So
not to be morbid, but if there are no cancer screenings, cancer goes away.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's amazing how we fixed everything.
Yep.
So yeah, if we never look in the water, there won't be any sharks. And yeah, again, I come back to how weird it is that this film from 1975 is just resonating like crazy with me. And again, I don't know the history at the time and what they were facing. I should, but all of my education in high school cut off at the last war that we won. And so yeah, I'm utterly flabbergasted at how all of this is literally playing out in real life in front of us. I know that's what we do on this show, but I really don't know that we've hit another film that is so incredibly, I can turn on the TV and it's right there.
That's right. Well, and also, along with that, I think, Don, you mentioned Hooper. Hooper, he's the perfect character. Like I love all the characters, but Hooper comes and he articulates so many of the thoughts that the audience has been having. Right? He calls out. He said, "This is no boating accident. Wasn't Jack the Ripper." He says the things that we have been wanting to say, and in response, he is attacked for saying the truth. Right? You mentioned the line there. Stick your head in there and see how big the mouth is. Then, right? He gets shouted at. He gets shouted down. He gets derided because he dares to say what's right in front of their faces that they don't want to believe. So you not only have this peddling of mendacity, but you also have this vehement, angry, even violent denial of truth.
There's something that I did have, and I didn't think about. Obviously, I didn't think about this one, but I thought about it as I watched this as an adult, and of course, I thought more about it this viewing, which was Brody's. You get an idea about Brody's psyche, or at least some of the phobias that he has, or the discomfort that he has, and it's not just with this job that he has just started. I mean, he's about a year into it because, as the wife says, or as you get the indication, he hasn't been there a year.
Right.
They bought the house in the fall, and he makes the comment like, when did the sunlight start coming into our bedroom? And the wife's like, he's like, oh, the sunlight wasn't here when we got this house. And she was like, well, we bought the house in the fall.
Yep.
So, kind of that understanding of, hey, they have not been adjusted to this town or anything that's going on this island itself, but it's small enough to where people know who he is. Obviously, he's the chief, but people know who he is. Even when he's not in uniform, people are so emboldened to bother him on the beach when, you're supposed to be enjoying that time with your family. They're up in his face asking him all these questions. He can't necessarily focus on his job. But what's great about him is, you see how focused he is on public safety from the beginning, because when he gets that indication that the first death was probably shark related, he gets the report and he confirms the report. He asks for the signs to close the beach because he wants to be so proactive about it. He wants to be so in front of this fight. says we need to close the beaches. Where are the signs? Where are the beach closed signs? And it's crazy how when he starts asking for these signs, he's told, well, we don't have any. We've never had to close the beach. I'm going to go out here. I'm the guy who's in charge. I'm going to go get some signs made. I'm going to make, one of my cops do this, and has the signs put up. And of course, that's when it leads to that conversation with the town fathers or the mayor and his crew. Because he's doing what they should be doing.
Yes.
By thinking about public safety. But you also get an indication about the uncertainty that he has with water at all. Because his wife, Ellen, even says, or at least in a conversation, I think, with Hooper, about how he's never liked being around the water. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like it. When we take the ferry, he sits in the car. Yeah. He doesn't like this. Yeah. And just the idea that he's having to deal with so many things that when it got to the end, as a kid, that stuff just, it flew past me. But at the end, when he's on the boat with Quint and Hooper, and they're all talking about catching this shark, and Quint gives his horror stories, and Hooper and Quint are showing their scars to each other. This guy's probably thinking, why am I out on this boat? Like, I'm the police chief. Like, I could just send Hooper and Quint. Why do I need to be out here? But it's really an issue of he's having to deal with the fear that he has of water. And then also combining that with the duty that he has to where it's like, I have to do this in order to somehow feel validated as the chief of police. Mm-hmm. Despite, Alex's mom coming in and smacking me in the face is bigger than Miss Kintner's pain and suffering. It's about, I am charged with the safety of these people, and my fear of water be damned, which, that last 30 minutes, you get no indication that he's scared of water because that shark's there.
Yeah, I do think it's just the screenplay is so perfect, and Roy Scheider was so perfect. I think with any other actor, I don't know that we're going to buy it the way that we buy it with Scheider, because he's got this natural toughness and physicality. So that when he does finally evolve at the end, when he finally does, claim, his heroism at the end, it's very believable. But the fact is that he's been made. I don't know who said it, but one storytelling, teacher or coach once said that you need to not only make your protagonist face his or her fears, you need, when he or she faces them, and they need to be 10 times worse than he or she thought they would be. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so he's afraid of, in that conversation at dinner, she's talking about him sitting in his, in the car on the ferry. She says there's a clinical name for it, and Brody says drowning, right? Yeah. And so his fear is drowning, but, facing a 26-foot man-eating great white shark who's just eaten one of your friends is 10 times worse, 50 times worse. And I love, in the greater, this sounds cheesy, like a platitude, but it's true, the greater the difficulty, the greater the battle, the more glory there is in surmounting it. And I think that's why we do cheer, with such energy and catharsis when he triumphs, because everything was stacked against him. They do such a great job of making it at every turn, making it worse than it might be. They never let him off the hook. That scene with Kintner's mom, we've alluded to a couple times. I mean, I think that scene, she, first of all, to have the mother confront Brody, I mean, that is like, this is the ultimate pain that any human could undergo to lose a child. And she puts it all on Brody. She slaps him. They did like 33 takes of that. And Scheider kept telling, I think Lee Fierro was her name, kept telling her to hit him harder and harder and harder, broke his glasses, made him bleed. And that's the thing, that moment is a metaphor for what the screenwriters do to Brody throughout the movie. They never pull their punches. They make them 10 times more severe than they might otherwise be with lesser writing. But and you even mentioned just the fact that he is a transplant. It's so clear that he's a fish out of water. At every turn he faces, a lack of acceptance. He's constantly being warned. This is your first summer, What does that mean, right? I'm merely saying, Martin, right? But he gets all of these threats. He gets confronted. He gets mistreated. And I think all of these things, for him to have to grapple with and overcome, I think that's one of the reasons why the ending still resonates and gets audience. My students clap. Yeah, not all of them clap, but there's always a smattering of applause, right? And I like to watch their faces. I look over and they're like slumping in their seats and grinning, right? They're just, oh, thank goodness, right? And to elicit that sort of emotional response, I think just shows how exquisitely the whole thing is constructed and acted.
Yeah, I couldn't say that any better. Everything about it is just great. I had no idea there were that many takes of the slap. But that really explains. There's so much emotion in that slap, and it's so real. And I know I kind of made fun of it a little bit ago when I said, "Yeah, lady, we all knew it was dangerous," But like, really, that shot is just great. So, hearing your story about that really just made it better for me because I realized how important it was to the actors, and I kind of think that dedication just to that kind of might be why this whole film holds up so well. Because if you're taking one thing that seriously, you're probably taking a lot of it that seriously. And I think that is a reason that films tend to stay great longer. It's the amount of work that goes into it. It shows. That's and right. So, I really wanted to say how much that story just like made everything make sense to me. That was great.
Well, yeah, and you talk about being completely and utterly committed. Something else about that scene I love so much, because Brody, it's in his change is plausible, his change is believable because it's gradual. That's a turning point not only for him, but it's a turning point it's really where the friendship begins with him and Hooper, and it's one of the reasons why. And I think Peter Benchley was a great writer and a great dude. I don't like the book Jaws very much. And one of the reasons I don't like it as much is because of the character of Matt Hooper. In the book, not to spoil it too much, but he cheats with Brody's wife. He's not the guy. The cinematic Hooper is just endlessly better than the book Hooper. And there, a lot of times the movie's like a buddy movie. And the relationship grows organically. I think that's the pivotal moment in the relationship because after Mrs. Kittner walks away, the mayor says, "I'm sorry, Martin, she's wrong." Most humans, all right, most of us, because we've talked about people deluding themselves, we don't want to think the worst of ourselves. We want to think that we're good at heart. Most people to the mayor would have responded, "Yeah, I know. She's just distraught. And, I understand." Brody doesn't say any of that crap. Brody says, "No, she's not." He owns it. It's my fault. I screwed up. The little boy is dead. And the reaction shot we get there, the mayor says, "Let's cut this son of a bitch down before it stinks up the whole island." The reaction shot we get as Brody walks away, they cut to Hooper. And Hooper is watching after Brody because he sees very clearly that contrast between the mayor and his willingness to be like everybody else, to believe lies, to make themselves feel better. And he sees that Brody, though flawed, is a different person. He's a person who, when the chips are down, is going to do and say the right thing, or at least try to. And that's why when he comes over for dinner that night, that's why when they start to interact and they have this kind of quirky, sarcastic, interplay, it feels real. When we're little, the friendships we have are not necessarily predicated on things that are lasting or real or even logical. Like you can be friends with somebody because they're on your little league team or because their locker's next to you. I think as we get older, most of us, the friendships we keep are the ones that are really based on respect, on mutual respect. If you don't respect somebody, you're not going to trust that person. You're not going to want to waste your time with that person. And I think that Hooper respects Brody. And Brody has already seen Hooper in action by that point, saw him during the autopsy, or at least during the examination of Chrissy Watkins. Brody respects Hooper. And I think that's why that friendship is so palpable. And I think that's why we buy them, even though they're different, right? They're different levels of, in the economy, the socioeconomic. They're different types of backgrounds. Brody's a cop. Hooper's born of the purple. But even though, Brody's a landlubber, and Hooper's this incredibly experienced maritime character. But despite how different they are, we believe they're friends because they respect each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't really, obviously, having seen this once all the way through, I haven't broken it down nearly as much, but it really is neat how much effort they put into letting these characters see each other in these positions to really solidify that friendship or that respect, like you were talking about. A lot of movies, they just kind of like, well, Tom's always been here for me,
Right.
like, they could have easily gone with Brody's always lived on the island and grew up with Hooper, and you could have just, we've been friends since the second grade. But instead, this nuance and these moments add so much that you don't get with other scripts.
That's right. There are no shortcuts in Jaws.
Something I paid attention to in this film, or at least paid more attention to this time watching it, is when Quint, Hooper, and Brody are all in the Orca, Quint's ship, that they have their fun. They're comparing scars from different types of aquatic life or past experiences. But what really stood out to me, which was into giving you a sense of Quint's backstory, was when he talks about he was in the war, World War II. He was in the war. It was a secret mission. And he even jokes like, it was such a secret mission, or such a top secret mission, we weren't even given distress signals to release. So when there wasn't their incident, 1,100 men got thrown overboard, or at least were out in the water, treading water. And he talks about how he's out there, the sharks were attacking, and he taps his buddy because his buddy was like bobbing up and down one night that they were, in the sequence of nights that they're waiting to be rescued. And he's sitting there, he's like, he's just bobbing up and down like an apple. And even with, knowing I've seen this movie a number of times, I'm sitting there like, that fucker's probably dead. He's probably dead. I'm like, idiot, you've seen this movie like 100 times. He's dead. And he's talking about the friend that he's sitting there, and he realizes like, shark came and bit him in half. And, it was just his torso and his upper body that's just sitting there bobbing. And just thinking about his reaction to this traumatic event. Like, war is already a traumatic event. War itself is, to paraphrase any number of commanders, soldiers, philosophers, historians, war is hell. Mm-hmm. And he's already survived that. And now you are basically chum in human form. And he sees, one of his friends that's been bitten in half by a shark, and he eventually gets rescued. But what really screwed me, I see that it would have screwed me up as far as if I'd been there, is when he talks about, PBY or PYB showed up and it started picking us all up. And he said there were 1,100 men, 316 got out or were saved. The rest went to the sharks. And that one line he says of, I was just waiting for my turn. And the way he says it, you're not sure if he's talking about he was waiting for his turn to get rescued or his turn to get eaten. Because he's not clear about it. He's like, I just sat there. I was waiting my turn. And just how dark and how strongly he delivers that, it makes you think about, this man is thinking about death and life at the same time. Mm-hmm. Like, which one is he going to be a recipient of? And I even wrote down in my notes, it was like, a story like that, I would never get in the water again. But here you see this guy, he's a captain of his own ship. Like, it seems as though he has some peace. He doesn't have that survivor's guilt or that survivor's remorse that comes with an incident like that, where he goes out on the ocean. But at least there's this understanding that there may be some issues he has with dealing with it, because he talks about, oh yeah, I got, he's talking about the scars. Oh, I got this, after I was celebrating or after the demise of my third wife, the death of my third wife, and the drinking and the loneliness. So it seems as though he doesn't want to be around people, and he even makes that comment about, like, I don't need a crew, I don't want anybody with me. I'm going to go hunt that shark by myself.
Yep.
So you almost feel like he doesn't want to have to deal with the trauma of seeing that happen to somebody else or being around them. And if he goes out and the shark kills him, then, oh, well, if he was able to bring the shark back, great, 10 grand for him. What did you guys think about that scene? Or at least, how it went from kind of jovial to, holy shit, why'd you tell us this story?
that what you said, this is, again, the genius of Jaws. The miracle of Jaws is you just got me to think about something I never thought about before. I'd never thought about the reason why he says, he doesn't want anybody to go out with him, because of maybe not wanting other people to be victimized, because he's already had enough of that. He's had more than enough, more than should last him a lifetime. I'd never thought of it that way before, but I think that's very true. I mean, that speech, that's Spielberg's favorite scene in the movie. And it's not a director's scene, because it's very few cuts, right? It's almost one long take. That is an actor's scene through and through. And Spielberg's favorite scene, because you talked about the weightiness of it, the profundity of it. Robert Shaw, and one thing about that too, and it's funny, like, movies are this uniquely collaborative art form, and sometimes those disparate elements just equal disaster, because they don't meld together very well. That they just, you can see these you can see the swirls in the recipe, and it doesn't congeal the way it's supposed to. But with this movie, like that speech was written by 5 different people. Peter Benchley wrote the original screenplay, and it wasn't very good, because like so many novelists, and I just try. I know you guys have experience in this realm, in the screenwriting realm. It's tough to adapt your own work, because you want to keep so much in it. These are your babies, and the story, so it's hard to jettison. But Benchley's screenplay was not fit for the screen. It had everything in it. And Spielberg very politely said thank you, and then basically threw it aside and wrote his own. And it was much better. And then Carl Gottlieb, the journalist in the baby blue sport coat on the ferry scene, he was the credited screenwriter and did most of the screenplay. He rewrote Spielberg. But then they brought in Howard Sackler, this I think he was a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. I think he wrote The Great White Hope with James Earl Jones. But anyway, he rewrote that speech from Gottlieb. And then Robert Shaw took the Sackler version the night before and rewrote it, embellishing certain details, removing things, changing the wording. So it was Benchley, Spielberg, Gottlieb, Sackler, Shaw. And rather than destroying it, it became something transcendent. It's the most famous monologue in movie history. I would say it's even more famous than, for example, Marlon Brando's "I Could Have Been a Contender" speech in On the Waterfront. I think that monologue from Quint is the most famous monologue in history. And like you said, it is the Rosetta Stone for his character. It explains everything about his character. And the one little piece of Benchley that remains in that final iteration that we see, Benchley based a lot of Jaws on Moby Dick. There's a lot of Ahab in Quint. And Ahab was this monomaniac. He was bent on destroying the white whale, because he called it unmanned. He'd lost part of his leg to the white whale, or to Moby Dick. And so, Quint had not lost something physically, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, every aspect of him had been devastated by this event with the shark. And he feels like, I think he comes to believe that if he can kill Jaws, he can get back what was lost and gain some revenge and retribution and restore what was taken from him. So it's everything for him. That's why he dashes the radio. That's why he refuses to behave rationally, right? Mm-hmm. Because this becomes his one obsession. Anyway, I'll shut up.
No, that was awesome. I definitely noticed a lot of Moby Dick, and I was like, is it just me because he's fighting a fish? But no, like the more I thought about it, the more I went to the exact same place you did, where it's not a physical thing, but he definitely lost a lot, and that is so incredibly powerful. And especially given the time of 1975, like you had so many people that had been in Vietnam or Korea or any of that kind of stuff who all lost something, and maybe you didn't lose your arm or your leg, but you lost something. Yeah. And or even faith in America, to be honest, like you lost something that you had before you went. And I think that is such a time capsule. Like, I think you could do something similar now, but I really feel like that time period makes this monologue.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Don, you'd know better than that, probably about than me with your historian background here. But yeah, what do you think about that?
I was going to say it's perfect for the time because the film's coming out in 1975. The Vietnam is come to an end as far as active conflict. But I think it's great to address that because there were the majority of the films that dealt with Vietnam itself, or war for that matter, up to that point, were all like glorifying, films and uber patriotic, and they didn't really deal with the darkness of it. I think there's Apocalypse Now does it, but it's the Heart of Darkness that's adapted for film and adapted for those circumstances. Right. And you don't really get an honest film about Vietnam until you have Full Metal Jacket, Hamburger Hill, Platoon, and a handful of others in the 80s. And I remember Oliver Stone, who volunteered to go to Vietnam, when he came back, he couldn't sell the screenplay for the film, after he'd gotten out of school. He couldn't sell the screenplay because he kept getting told, at least from the stories about it, he kept getting told no one wants to see anything about Vietnam. And he's like, no, this is about like how, this brotherhood develops and how people have to deal with all these stresses and the racism that's over there and all these things that are going on. It's a real gritty way of looking at it. And it was like, he couldn't get anyone to buy it until the 80s. Mm. And I think by having Quint talk about this is the same way that films like MASH, even though they're talking about the Korean conflict, or at least, based in the Korean conflict, they're talking about Vietnam. And the same thing for Quint. He's talking about, or he's talking about his experience in World War II, but his speech is really about all these guys coming home from Vietnam. I mean, that's one way that you could look at it, because when they were coming home, they weren't welcomed. Coming back to a fractured country, they weren't welcomed. The VA facilities in the 60s and 70s were really bad. They've gotten a lot better. They're not perfect now, but they were really bad in the 60s and 70s. And you got to imagine, how many people had to see such horrific stuff over there. And then you come back and you're trying to adjust to this world. So you had a good number of vets that just said, screw it. I'm going to go live by myself. Or you have trouble maintaining relationships. You have a good number of vets, like I think, I forget the guy's name, but his story was captured in Born on the 4th of July. He went to Mexico as part of his journey to kind of get back to who he was. He went to Mexico and hooked up with a bunch of American vets there who just left America. They're like, screw this country. You guys don't like us. You don't want us here. We're just going to leave. And I think that's what you get with Quint, is that military veteran who has never adjusted back to life, but he's found this one thing that keeps him going. And, you mentioned Moby Dick, but there's also The Old Man and the Sea. There's John Steinbeck's Pearl that you could compare this to, as far as, somebody trying to find something that will get them through, or at least get them to some level of accomplishment in their life.
Yeah. 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 And one other thing too about that, you get through that story, Quint, his animosity toward Hooper is just so heated and seemingly irrational. You kind of understand it better there, because when he first meets Hooper, he grabs his hands. You got city hands, Hooper. Been counting money all your life, right? why do you? I mean, yeah, class warfare is a thing. We could see him being bitter toward Hooper for that, but I think we really see why later on, because he's been through hell, right? And Hooper has been out day sailing or pleasure boating, and I think we understand better. We don't necessarily agree with it because we love Hooper, but we see why Quint would be resentful of somebody like that.
Well, and he's able to make his way because of his parents. And Brody even asked him, he's like, "Oh, well, you got all this cool equipment. Where'd you get it from? I mean, you get this from funding? You get this from your research?" He's like, "No." He's like, "Are you rich?" He's like, "My parents are." It just kind of blows it off. And Quint kind of makes a shot at him, whether he knows he does or not. But when they're going and looking for the shark, he's like, I don't do it like these other guys with all this fancy equipment and all these different types of, trackers and whatever. And watching the film, you're like, "Ooh, Hooper, he's calling you out."
For sure.
Probably hasn't been on your boat, but he's calling you out. He knows the kind of person you are.
Yep.
Well, and it's that juxtaposition between the two really it represents that whole the old way versus the college educated kids,
Mm-hmm.
And that absolute war there. It's almost like kind of innovation versus tradition, Quint is so set in the past and in how he's done it. He doesn't want any kind of technology. He doesn't want this stuff. He wants that. If he could, he wants that hand-to-hand combat with the shark, Yeah. This guy would love to saddle the shark and break its neck if that was even possible, Whereas Hooper is very much here's the science that's happening. Here's the different things we could use. And I think that also reflects that very military thing I was just talking about, because one of the biggest things with Vietnam was if you were college educated, you got the good jobs. You got to sit in Tokyo. You got to, do communication stuff or things like that. And non-college educated kids got to go get killed.
Yep.
And so not Hooper, Quint might have that animosity right there. Like, you wouldn't have fucking been on the lines with me, you little, whatever. But so there's that to me, that could definitely be going on. And I know it wasn't Vietnam for him, but I'm saying story-wise and what they're reflecting, I think it's very representative of that idea. The thing I will note, I was going to kind of talk about women's roles in this film and how they get kind of pushed to the side, like women have to stay home, blah, 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 blah. The men are on the boat. And I actually want to rethink that based on what I'm about to say. I think it's very representative of the military as well. These three guys go on this boat, not knowing each other, not overly getting along, although two of them have respect for each other. One of them definitely doesn't, and it's exactly like being thrown into war with people you don't know. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Brody gets the shot and he gets to take this shot by himself, but without all three men doing their parts, they don't get to that. And we definitely don't get to the end of the film without each person doing their thing. And it is kind of reminiscent of a war movie because the one guy dies and the other two are left with that, Mm-hmm. I'm obviously just spitballing. Again, I've only seen this once, as I'm sure people will remind me for the rest of my life. And, but yeah, I'm definitely seeing parallels between all war movies my father subjected me to and this.
I think that's really insightful, actually, James. I mean, I'm not just saying that to make you feel better here, but I think you're very correct. And again, I'm seeing this anew as well, because I'd never looked at it. I tell my students one of the reasons this is so successful, this film, why it's so timeless, is because it is representative of so many genres. It's obviously an adventure. It's a horror movie. It's action packed. It's a buddy movie at times. It's a road movie on the water where there's journey and there's even a sing along like in all road movies. But I think you're right. I think in addition to that, you could perceive this as a war movie because of the very facets you just spoke about.
Well, thank you.
There were a couple of things that I thought was interesting, and when you're talking about the gender dynamics of this, I thought it was interesting that it's not just about the guys on the boat when it's Quint, Hooper, and Brody, But you also have early on in the film, it's almost like a mob mentality takes over, where all these men that are out on the boats, they have to get this thing. And it's not necessarily about protecting the town. It's about, I'm the one who did it. And, getting that go behind it, posing with the shark, or at least the shark that they believe is responsible for the attacks. And just that idea of where Brody, for Brody, it's about making sure the community is safe. For these guys, and even Quint for that matter, because Quint wants the money. But for the rest of them, it's all about, I want to be the one who gets the credit for this, which, again, is very telling, when you're starting to analyze society, because, there's a bounty is a $3,000 bounty that's put out to get the shark. But for some people, it's not just about the money. It's about the notoriety that comes with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think, motives are so fascinating in this, and there are less than noble motives, I think, for the majority of characters, really. I mean, except for, the Chief and Hooper and maybe Quint, depending on how you look at Quint. There's a scene in Jaws that, I mean, every scene to me is just beautiful. I don't know if you guys want to talk about either of these scenes. Two scenes that I find fascinating. One is the beach scene where Alex Kintner ultimately meets his demise. And the other is it's just a masterclass of acting where after Hooper sees Ben Gardner's boat, and then I think it's the granddaddy of all jump scares, the most effective jump scare maybe in movies, when Hooper is under the water and the face appears in the hole in the hull, right? With one eye, and then the dialogue we get succeeding that between Brody, the mayor, and Hooper is just incredible. But the first one I mentioned, the scene where so what I do, one of the things that I teach in film, that we have a Hitchcock unit, and we watch just scenes from Psycho. We watch all the way through Rear Window. We see bits and pieces of Vertigo and Psycho, but in Psycho we watch the shower scene twice, because it is this transformative moment in film. The revolutionized editing, revolutionized really every aspect of the medium. I believe the beach scene where Alex Kintner dies, I think that's the equal of the shower scene. I think that Spielberg's artistry is equal to Hitchcock's. And I say that not to diminish Hitchcock, because I love Hitchcock's filmmaking. I say that to champion what Spielberg did. That whole sequence is just shot by shot. It is the perfect suspense set piece. Every aspect of that is so good. I think one aspect that Spielberg has spoken about, or a couple things, and some of this is just straight from him. That scene is not about Alex Kintner. It's about Chief Brody. It's about the paranoia, Chief Brody knowing that he's made a mistake, knowing he's making a mistake in real time, but not stopping it because he knows that there's a shark in the water. So the scene is all about the headspace that Brody inhabits. And one thing Spielberg's famous for is they call it the Spielberg oneer. He loves to do these sustained tracking shots, and he first conceived of that as one shot. But he realized the logistics were just impossible, because you have to have the Brody, his face, then we have to have the reverse where we see his point of view. So while he couldn't do one sustained tracking, what he did was he used beachgoers as horizontal wipes to wipe off one shot and wipe off the other, as we're going from the shots of Brody to the shots of the water. And I think you guys have probably heard of how Spielberg used yellow as a signal color for danger. And after Jaws, you see yellow used all the time. You see it, like, for example, in The Shining, the Torrance's car is yellow and it's heading toward the Overlook. You see yellow ever after used as a signal color for danger, for caution. And as we see early in that sequence, the horizontal wipes, the beachgoers are wearing blue bathing suits. But as the paranoia increases, as we get closer to the attack, they're yellow bathing suits that wipe off one shot and then wipe off the other. Another facet of that's just absolutely incredible is John Williams. John Williams is, he's like, to me, an angel in human form. I can't even believe what he has accomplished. John Williams, he just makes magic, and his his genius, Spielberg talks about this. It's not just the music itself; it's how he spots it in a movie. It's where he chooses, coordinates with the sound department to let them sing, and then when he wants the music to take center stage, there is an absence of music throughout almost the entire sequence, and therefore, because of that opening scene where Christy Watkins is killed, actually even before that, the opening credits. We begin with this shark's point of view as we hear the theme. So forever after, we associate that thump thump with the shark. And when that thump thump is not, the shark is not there. That's why in the false scare in the 4th of July scene, there's really no suspense because we sense this absence. We know, and when we finally hear the music, that's when we get those underwater shots of ankles and calves. And we finally start to zoom. We finally start to move toward Alex Kintner's raft, and of course, it's yellow, as is Alex Kintner's mother's hat. All right, as is the shirt of the owner of Pippet the dog. So there are actually 2 victims in that scene. The dog is killed first, and then Alex Kintner. If you watch the editing, though their fates are intertwined. We keep cutting from dog to boy to boy to dog. Because those are the 2 victims of the shark. One other thing, there's so much in that scene. But one other thing that if you rewatch it, I think you'll find fascinating. Essentially, like, I don't know about you guys, but when I make a mistake, I feel guilty about it. You could argue that Brody makes the ultimate mistake in allowing Alex Kintner to die. Obviously, he didn't kill him himself, but he could have prevented it had he been a stronger leader. So if you're Spielberg, how do you show that Alex Kintner is, for all intents and purposes, he's going to climb inside Chief Brody's head for the rest of Brody's life? If you watch that, when Alex, and it's such amazing screenwriting. We see Alex with his mother, and he's begging his mom, like all kids do, 10 more minutes. Oh, Alex Kintner, your fingers are beginning to prune. This is not a negligent mom. This is a good mom, all right? She's very attentive to her son, maybe even overprotective. And finally, he prevails, and she allows him. Before he goes in the water, he walks toward Brody, and Brody's in the foreground. Alex climbs up onto this little platform behind Brody, but the way it's framed, Alex climbs inside Brody's head. Like the little boy disappears inside Brody because Brody's in the foreground. He climbs in behind Brody. He climbs into his head because that's where he will remain for the rest.
Holy crap!
The rest of the film, and I think we would all agree that a motivated character is an interesting character. That's what the scene is really about, because forever after, despite his morbid fear of drowning, despite everything, despite his own personal failings, after that happens, he will not stop. He will stop at nothing to fight that shark, to stop the problem, to kill the shark, because he has the fuel, and that fuel is Alex Kintner. So anyway, I'll shut up. But anyway, I find that scene just so perfectly created by Spielberg.
You can talk for the next 6 hours. That's fine.
Like, I've got to go back and watch it.
Yeah, no, totally. I can't wait to see it for the second time. No, you just blew my mind. I can't wait to watch this. So yeah,
that's just a little bit of what's in there. And it's not. This is Spielberg that I just can't believe at age 26. At age 26, right? Nobody has ever made a movie like Jaws. He did that at an age where many of us are still living in our parents' basements, right? I couldn't do the laundry at age 26. I couldn't even make microwave popcorn. He was on a barge battling the studio who wanted to fire him, making, at that time, the best-selling movie in history, this universal success, no pun intended, right? This box office juggernaut, this critical darling that should have, I love One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but I love Jaws more. It was nominated for Best Picture. No movie accomplished quite what Jaws did, and he was 26 when he did it. To me, he's like Mozart, right? Mozart was writing concertos at age 5. That's what Spielberg was like. There's just no accounting for that kind of skill and talent.
Wow. You know what I took from that scene was just, hey, the shark goes past a bunch of people and didn't get them. like literally, I was comparing it to COVID and how you can be exposed to it and be fine or carry symptoms or whatever. And that's where my head stayed. And now I cannot wait to rewatch this scene.
No, there's still that COVID connection. I think it's still relevant in that way.
Nobody cares about that. We care about what you just said.
or pretend to care, and for that I really appreciate. I really so, I mean, just scene by scene, the whole thing is just so perfect. I mean, there's so much to unpack in every moment. I think every frame. There's this video series called Every Frame a Painting by Tony Zhao. I think every frame is a painting. Of that movie. I think every moment of that movie is just magical. That dialogue scene that I don't think it's as deep a dive probably as the beach scene, but it's so beautifully written and beautifully acted by Murray Hamilton, by the mayor, by Chief Brody, by Richard Dreyfuss. That is a masterclass in acting. I mean, that everything, the way it's blocked, the way that there's interruptive dialogue, how each character has a different script. It is just, it's one of the best acted scenes and best written scenes I've ever seen. And, to bring the kind of conversation full circle, what I love about that is, Brody and Hooper are trying with all their might to get him to see what's right in front of his face. He repeatedly, he's like bulletproof. He's like the Terminator. He repels every conversational gambit, every argument that they utter. And what really bothers him in that scene isn't that Ben Gardner is dead, isn't that Alex Kintner and Chrissy Watkins are dead. What bothers him is the defaced billboard. I want those happy bastards caught and strung up by their Buster Browns. That is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message. And that's what bothers him. He doesn't care about all this other stuff. He doesn't care about the deaths that have happened or that might still happen. He cares because that's a bad look. Right? That looks bad for the island politically. And by the way, not to belabor the point, but that whole sign is framed in yellow. All right, because that shows how the shark problem has encompassed the entire island, has swallowed it whole, essentially. It's really strategically used, so well used throughout the film.
Well, I mean, yellow, as far as horror, like I know you listed a lot of examples, but the yellow raincoat has become like this almighty symbol in so many horror films.
Yeah,
And I always wonder why it's a raincoat. Like, does that add because it's a storm that you can't control or what? Like, I get the yellow part, but it's always a raincoat in so many things. I don't know. Kind of odd.
I don't know.
These are the weird things I think about late at night.
Well, with the mayor, it's interesting because we talk about the parallels to today. With that part about the eek, a shark, the defacing of the billboard is the thing that throws them off the deep end. It's still that thing of perception and the image of this island. There could be sharks out there just as long as we don't go looking for them. We don't really have to deal with them. Right. This is just an isolated incident. If you want to, compare it to COVID or anything else that's going on or any type of crisis that's going on, it's the same thing. It's, if we go out and look for this stuff or we investigate, more, of course we're going to have more crime. Or if we police more, we're going to have this. Or if we test more kids, we're going to it's going to determine that, they don't know as much stuff as we think that they do. There's all these negatives that you can apply to it, as opposed to, hey, if we go find this shark, which this would be the best way the mayor could probably run this into a capitalist thing. Hey, it's the first year they send people out to go look for a shark. Then the next year is, all right, get your fees in, your entry fees in for the Amityville shark hunt.
Right.
It's laughable at how this guy is the mayor of this town, but does not think, or doesn't have the foresight enough to think, if there are sharks out there eating people, it's going to be bad no matter what. And let's not even worry about it, man. Let's just all chill. There are no sharks.
Yeah.
This didn't happen, but damn it, that billboard got screwed up. Hey, how dare you spray paint that statue of a guy who owned 1,000 slaves and ran the Klan? How dare you? That's part of our country's history.
Well, there you go, and I think that's the thing. It's like to admit that there is a problem is so difficult, and I don't know if we get into toxic masculinity here or not, but this idea of of wanting to appear problemless at all costs. To take down the statues, which of course we should have done so many decades ago. Really, the statues never should have been erected,
Right.
But that would admit that our history is not perfect, right? That there are despicable people who have been held up as paragons. That there are despicable treatments of others that still go on and certainly went on. With some of these monuments, and people don't want to acknowledge that. They want to pretend that everything is all right, everything is okay. This obsession with appearances and appearing strong. I think about, again, I hate to bring it all back to this, but both of you guys, I think, have done this at least once in this conversation to the current president. This refusal to wear a mask, because that would be admitting there's a problem, but then B, in his twisted mind, showing weakness. When I see, you guys can vote for whomever you want. When I see Biden in a mask, I think, man, he's pretty smart. And not only is he smart, I think he cares about others. Because I wear a mask not just for me. I wear a mask because of my grandpa who's 95, and I don't want to. I don't want to kill him, and I don't want to kill anybody else's grandpa or anybody else's kid. And to me, I think most of us would agree this is common sense. And denying that there's a problem and not wearing a mask, that's not strength, right? That's a combination of weakness, of insecurity, and of stupidity, willful ignorance. And I think we see that with the mayor's entire reaction. But again, because we're still seeing it in 2020, it is not at all an unbelievable kind of behavior. I mean, I think that we all recognize it when we see the mayor. We're like, oh, yep, that's what he'd do. That's exactly what he'd do. And that's what this mayor I know, or this city council member I know, or this president that I know. That's exactly what he would do.
Or the governor of Arizona. Oh, did I say that out loud?
Exactly.
Or Texas.
Seriously, exactly. We're seeing that it's that kind of insecurity and stupidity. It is rampant, right? And it's guys. It's under the guise of strength, and it is the opposite of strength. And I think that's one of the reasons why we like Brody, because they have this healthy fear. Like we can relate to that. We can respond to that emotionally and connect with that. Yeah, hell yeah, I'd be scared too. I'd be as frightened as Brody. I'd be more frightened than Brody is, right? And so those things don't make him weak. Those things make him human. So anyway.
When I look at Joe Biden wearing a mask, what I think is what I think when I look at anyone else wearing a mask, which is that person listens to experts.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And I don't know. I don't understand how anyone can think they know more than somebody who went to medical school or got a doctorate in this sort of thing or whatever else. Like somebody who spent years learning this stuff. And then I know better because I don't want to be inconvenienced.
Yeah.
That's insane to me.
Well, I tell you, that's the danger. That's the real danger. That's how pernicious, what's happening now is, because you've got a couple extreme conservative news sources that essentially claim to have. I know that every news source wants to be the primary news source, but they claim to have, the truth. And the followers believe that, when you've got to work so hard, essentially, so we can't listen to any university, any college, because they're liberal, like breeding grounds, right? That's what is every. So we throw out every university, every college. They're just liberal brainwashing systems. Okay, think about how much you've got to discard here to go that way. You've got to throw out all universities and colleges. You've got to throw out basically all news sources, okay? CNN, USA Today, NBC, CBS, ABC, BBC, all of them, they're all fake news, all right? These two over here are correct. Everything else is wrong, all right? to believe this stuff. And so you see, it's not that big of a leap to then discount science, to discount the sum of human scientific knowledge acquisition. That gets thrown out too, because that's all part of the fake news and liberal conspiracy. That's something peddled by these left wing, these left wing professors, right? But that's how dangerous these times are, because you have all of these reliable sources lumped in together and called fake, and somehow some have convinced themselves that this tiny little corner has the only truth that there is, and the rest is lies, including all science. It's just a facade.
People are going to believe what you tell them if you're a form of authority. Early on, when you have Brody and the mayor, or at least I should say the mayor, saying one thing, even though it's in counter to what what Chief Brody is saying, people are willing to believe it because it's what they need to hear. Not necessarily confirmation bias, but it's something that they need to hear. And I forgot I think the line that the mayor used was, "It's all psychological." I might be attributed to the wrong person, but that push that it's all psychological.
Mm-hmm.
That if I tell you we're going to be opening the beaches, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. This is a safe community. And it's kind of the same thing that we all see when there is violence that breaks out in places that we think are safe. The suburbs are no safer or less safe than a lot of urban areas and a lot of rural areas. I mean, you think about the amount of crime that can take place. I mean, when you're talking, adjusting for population and things like that, but it's no safer here where I am in Mississippi than it is in Phoenix. It's not necessarily less dangerous because there are murders that take place here, but there are a lot of people that don't see how their communities could be those dangerous places, so that when violence does break out in, let's say, a city like, well, that's a larger city, but a city in the South or in the city in the South, or like Kansas or the Southwest, right?
Minneapolis.
Well, I was going to stay away from that because I was going to say Midwest, but some violence takes place, right? And sometimes they'll bring that conversation to Chicago or New York or Los Angeles and say, well, it's not as violent as those places. Those places have many million people. Mm-hmm. So yes, if you have 300 people murdered in a city of 8 million people, by comparison, it's kind of lower than what you would have in a city or a town of 20,000 and 5 people got killed last year.
Right.
If you extrapolate, if you start to multiply the amount of people, your city is more dangerous, because people like to look at the raw numbers, and you can even do that with the shark attack in this film. There's one shark attack, or at least there's believed to be one shark attack. And then you start going over the math of how many shark attacks could take place. It becomes scary to these people, and it's scary because of the proximity that they have to the danger. The number of shark attacks that take place in the United States is relatively low. Mm-hmm. And I think the comparison I got one time was, you're more likely to get killed by a cow, because cows kill 20 people a year. You're more likely to get killed by a cow than you are by a shark.
Mm-hmm. Cows are evil, man.
But we're not scared of cows in the same way. Right. We're not scared of dogs in the same way. Dogs kill more people than sharks.
Right. For sure. Mosquitoes kill far more than all combined.
Yeah. But the biggest killer? Ignorance.
Nice.
Second biggest, kindness. But
man, oh man. A couple things really fast just to wrap this up. I want to say thank you. I've been putting this movie off, well, literally my entire life, apparently. So that's 42 years, give or take. And I really mean it when I say I cannot believe how great this movie is. Like, I always hear that it's great, but I tell people some pretty crappy movies are great because they're great to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. One of the things I noticed that really blew my mind was I rented this on Amazon Prime. there was something like 3,600 ratings, right? And it had a 5-star review.
Wow.
Right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
I will say I love I love the death of the shark. This is a scene I've seen since I was a little kid, and it's just great. I love it. And the really important thing is that after he blows up, I mean, I finally feel like it's safe to go back into the water. I don't know about you guys, but you know. So I want to thank you for joining the show today. Why don't you tell people where they can find you online and buy your books and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So, you can find me on Twitter. I'm there a lot under Jonathan Janz. I'm on Instagram at jonathan.janz. I am on Facebook for the moment, although I'm wrestling with that for a lot of reasons. I don't want to get off on another tangent here. But I'm currently on there as Jonathan Janz. Then you can find my books anywhere, basically. So Amazon, I think, is where that a lot of people go. So you can do that. Also, subscribe to my newsletter. You go to my website, jonathanjanz.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter. And I promise I won't spam you. I think I write one once every 2 months, something like that. So they're not frequent, but I think that they have a lot of good stuff in them when they are sent out. So I'd love for you to subscribe to my newsletter.
Very cool.
And thank you both for having me. You guys were amazing. This was a blast.
Look, thank you for coming on, and thank you for getting James to do this, because I kept saying, I was like, man, we need to do Jaws. We need to do Jaws.
I could,
like, he didn't reveal to me that he had never seen it. And when he finally says, this will be the first time I cursed at him so many times through text messages because I was so angry that I've never been angry about someone not seeing a movie. I pulled the whole, hey man, you should really see this. Is a great movie. How could you have not seen this movie? I was mad at him. Like I wanted to fight him.
Well, no, he showed me a list of movies that have been done that were off the table here, and I'm like, well, surely Jaws is one. Surely they've done Jaws. And I keep looking down. I was like, the double take. And then I wanted to make sure there wasn't a part of the email I didn't read. I'm like, Jaws is not on this list. And then when I asked you, it was still with trepidation. I was like, surely he just forgot to put it in there. And you said, okay, Jaws. I'm like, what? Yes. So excited. So excited.
I actually reread the emails today, and it's so funny because I think I said something like, oh, that's a great idea. And like, even in that moment, I was like, I should really watch that.
Yeah. Okay. One more thing. Let me plug one more thing. It's not out yet, and it won't be out for a while. Probably not for 2 years. I am writing. I'm 80% done with the rough draft. A novel called Amity. It is a suspense horror thriller that is a love letter to Jaws. So
nice.
Hopefully in about 2.5 years, once I find my publisher, all that stuff, hopefully Amity will come out, and it's a project that's going really well. So if any of you all are fans of Jaws, keep a lookout for updates on Amity, because it's a book I'm really excited about.
Something I would ask you, and we're trying to be better about this, but what are some other films that you would recommend in the same vein as Jaws, or something that you revere at the same level as Jaws?
Okay.
For people listening to watch.
Yeah. So not necessarily aquatic horror, but just like something of that quality.
Well, yeah, because we have, Deep Blue Sea, 47 Meters Down, The Meg, things like that. But it doesn't have to be, the shark film or anything in water for that matter. It's just something that this movie you would not necessarily put on an equal footing with, but something that, you see this movie and like, man, I love this movie because it gives me that same feeling.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a good question. There's a movie that I bet you two have seen that not everybody, though, probably has seen because it's older. But a movie that I'd put, Jaws probably on my all-time list is top 3. But a movie that's in my top 10 is Rear Window.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not the same kind of movie as Jaws, but I think it has the same craftsmanship and the same depth that Jaws has. And I just love when a director or a composer or an actress or whatever goes further than she or he has to go.
Okay.
Just for the sake of, who else does this? This sounds silly. Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan will do like 125 takes of this little seemingly inconsequential moment not a fight scene, but this little moment in the movie because he wants to get it right, because he wants the work to live forever. And I love, and that's I admire that about Jackie Chan. So I feel like, with Rear Window, you have that burning desire to make something, to maximize it, to wring every ounce of potential, because just for the sake of doing it, because you want to make something lasting, you want to make something that stands the test of time. And I really feel like that shows in Jaws. I think that dedication, that conviction is what makes it so special.
Definitely. I could not agree more. So we'll keep Rear Window open for you for when you want to come back on the show.
It's a date.
Excellent. All right. So I think that about wraps it up for this week. One more time, thank you for being here. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.